Hello, my wonderful business buddies. I am here to talk to you about times and seasons in our lives today. All humans are familiar with the concept of times and seasons, and I think women especially so because of the way our bodies are designed. We acknowledge that there are certain times, certain seasons, ebbs and flows of life that are more suited to certain things than other times. There is a season for having babies. When our marriage is healthy, hopefully, and we are fertile and we have energy and brain capacity and emotional capacity to care well for small, tiny babies and toddlers. It is an incredibly difficult job, an incredibly time consuming and energy consuming job. So there is a specific time of life set aside for that. Thank goodness we are not fertile into our 70s. So we have to be chasing little toddlers well into our 60s or 70s because that is not the time and season of life for small children. There's also a season for traveling. For me personally, that looks like when we have the financial means to do so. We can also afford to take time away from our regular obligations, work or community obligations. Also, when we're prepared to deal with kids away from home, because they're always a little bit more difficult to deal with, especially young kids, when you take them away from their schedule and familiar things. There has been, for me, a season for really intense self-development and growth. It would be silly if I recommended self-help books to my friends with 2-week-old babies, because keeping a newborn alive and working on new goals do not generally go hand in hand. You can't really improve yourself much when you are in survival mode, and that's what that looks like, having a new baby. Or maybe if you're sadly going through a divorce, that might be another survival time where you do not have the capacity to grow yourself in other ways. You are just kind of surviving. So we have seen this happen in our lives. If you look back, you can see the phases of life. The phase of going through school intensely, maybe in college, or the phase of building a career if you've had a career, or the phase of raising small children or homeschooling or whatever that may be. This concept of having times and seasons helps protect us mentally, emotionally, even physically from taking on too much. I believe that God made it very difficult physically to have children so that we wouldn't add a lot to our plate. I have a friend who has adopted some children, and she's actually mentioned that she had to be very cognizant of her newborn time with her babies because she wasn't physically recovering from birth. And so she had to make sure to not take on too much because that newborn required a lot from her. So these times and seasons are divinely inspired and given to us. I like to classify these times and seasons in 3 main categories. I already mentioned survival time, right? That's when you're back to basics. You're just focused on feeding yourself, on feeding the people you're in charge of, on getting sleep. That's about it. Maybe doing a little bit of basic laundry, nothing more. Then there is what I like to call just ordinary times. Life is full and it's joyful for the most part, and there are challenges, but there's nothing that too intensely requires our time and energy, and yet there's also not a lot of free time either. And then finally, there are those expansive times when our obligations wane a little bit. Maybe our kids get a little bit older, maybe they leave home, or maybe we end a career, or we end a church or a community obligation, and all of a sudden our life has expanded a little bit. We have a little bit more time and energy for something new. So you might want to ask yourself right now, what season of life am I in? Am I in a survival time? Am I in just one of those ordinary times? Or am I in an expansive time when I know I have a little bit more time and energy for something else? So today we're going to talk about how to determine if it is the time and season for you to create or to scale a business. Let me just temper your expectations here. I do not have the answer for you. In fact, no one does. There is no crystal ball or fortune cookie that will tell you if this is the right season for you to step into your business, whatever that looks like for you. Maybe it's launching a new one, or maybe it's scaling one you already have. Understanding our capabilities in this way is a deeply personal thing, and it requires checking in with ourselves, with our spouse, maybe even with our children, and most importantly, with God, to be willing to hear his whisperings and be fully cognizant and honest with yourself of your own limitations. This is very difficult for me. I will tell you examples of me throughout this episode where I struggle to acknowledge my limitations. I love to have a full life. I love to have lots of things going on. There are so many things I want to do with my life. And so understanding limitations, whether they be physical or emotional or mental, can be difficult for me. Maybe you're on the other side and you don't like to push yourself too much. Either way, we need to check in with God when we are considering adding something to our plate. You might already know I am chronically an underachiever. I don't like to do too much. I like to sit and relax mostly, and I like to take on less than I think maybe I probably should. Or maybe you are a chronic overachiever and you very often take on too much and think that there's always something better out there. And so you're always kind of chasing a new high or a new excitement or a new project. Understanding if you have a propensity one way or another in this regard will help you understand what phase maybe you should be in. Because if you are a chronic underachiever, God might be calling you to do something that you're not willing to do. Or if you're a chronic overachiever, he might be calling you to take a step back and to sit down for a minute, and you're not willing to hear that. So acknowledge which one you lean towards and then pay attention that God might be pushing you out of your comfort zone. Now, obviously, neither of these is innately better or worse. There are pros and cons to both. Ask an underachiever and they'll probably say, oh, I hate it. I wish I had more motivation. Ask an overachiever. They'll say, oh, I hate it. I wish I knew how to relax. But there are pros and cons to each. Understanding how we operate can help us make better decisions about what is right for us and help us listen to those promptings from God, especially when they go against what we innately want. In my experience, God very often pushes us to start something before we think we're ready. I don't know a lot of people who were like, I was just sitting around twiddling my thumbs, waiting to start a business. And God was like, all right, it's time now. Well, that kind of happened to me. But for most people, they're like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can do this. This is kind of scary. This is kind of panicky. Unlike me, who wants to dive in the deep end before it's the right time. And then God's like, come on, hold on, Bonnie, just wait, just listen to me. A lot of people struggle to dive in when the time is right. So decide which one you tend to be and then listen carefully. Here are a few other things to consider before deciding if you have both the time and the capacity to go all in on a business. A few questions to ask yourself. Are you regularly sleeping and eating relatively healthily? Now, it doesn't count if you could eat and sleep, but you're just choosing not to, like you're staying up till 11:30 eating an entire sleeve of Oreos because you feel like it. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about, is there some circumstance of your life that is preventing you from taking care of your body on a basic need? Like you have a troubled teen who needs to talk to you till late in the night, or you have a new baby, or you have a health problem that requires very specific nutritional needs, or you don't currently have the finances to feed yourself healthily. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about circumstances outside of your control. Another question, do you feel like you need an added dimension to your life to best fulfill your talents and abilities? Do you feel like something is lacking in your life? Your life could be very full, and on the outside it could look like everything's fine, but maybe somewhere in your soul or in your heart, you're feeling like, I want there to be something more. That's kind of always how it's felt for me before starting a business is I feel like something is missing. Are you currently able to show up for your family, your friends, your church in a way that you are satisfied with? Now, let me say, this does not mean you are perfect. You're not showing up perfectly in every avenue of your life. But are you able to make time for friends occasionally? Are you able to make time for your church obligations in a way that makes you feel satisfied? Are you able to show up for your family in a way that largely satisfies you? If so, then it might be time to move forward on your business. Last question to ask yourself, if you suddenly needed to spend 2 or 3 hours a day on your business, would that make life better for you or worse for you? Now, it could be harder at the beginning, but is that something you could adjust to, or does that seem completely impossible at this phase of life? I personally have always started my businesses as a hobby for the most part. Started very small, started just on the side, a couple hours here and there. And you can do the same. A lot of people think that starting a business looks like immediately dedicating 30 or even 40 hours a week to their business. That's not the case at all. You can build a business with just a few hours a week, but consistency is key. And you will also need to have the brain space for that. So ask yourself, would I have time for a new hobby at this point if I had decided to take up sewing or a new sport or something? Do I have the brain space, the physical capacity? Do I have the emotional capacity if things don't go as planned? So if things are very hard emotionally, that might not be a great time to start a new project where if it fails or something happens that you didn't expect, it kind of destroys you a little bit. So a few other questions to ask yourself. Here is the thing, like I mentioned before, you might not think that you have the time or the brain power for anything extra. You might feel like you are stretched to your capacity, but my businesses have always been able to give me something that other things have not. And again, this is a delicate balance. I'm not telling you to start something that you can't properly fit into your life that's going to make your family suffer or make life way too hard on you. But could you use something that makes you feel a little bit more productive or a little bit more useful? Are you lacking something that might make you feel like you're doing what God wants you to do or fulfilling your purpose? I personally need that feeling in my life. And I will delegate or skip housework any day of the week to feel more fulfilled or to feel like I'm doing God's work. So ask yourself that. Could I use a little bit more of that in exchange for maybe some things that don't need to be done by me? A few episodes ago in episode 62, I talked about scheduling your business. And sometimes we just have to delegate or drop some things in our lives in order to make space for something more important. Now, it's possible that you might be looking for reasons to start a business and you really, really want to. Or you might be dragging your feet and feeling like you're called to it, but you are looking for excuses not to. Regardless of which one that sounds more like you, whatever you want to find, you will find. So if you're looking for excuses not to do it, you will find those excuses. If you're looking for reasons to start the business, you will find those reasons. So this is what I recommend. Let's say you've asked these questions of yourself, you've taken some notes, you've determined whether you tend to be a little bit too overachieving or too underachieving, and you're thinking, okay, maybe God is calling me to do something more or even step back. Take a few days and connect with God. Take a few days to pray. You might want to list the pros and cons of this decision you're trying to make. Maybe you're trying to start a business or go a little bit more in on the business you already have. Take some time to meditate. So you want to ask God and then you want to listen. Stop talking. Go places where you typically hear God's answers. Maybe that's in nature, maybe in the temple, maybe just in your closet, maybe on a walk by yourself. And then write down thoughts or impressions that come to you. Sometimes I just jot these down on my phone because it's the only thing I have with me at a stoplight or walking around the block. If you're not hearing much and you feel like heaven is maybe a little bit closed, try reading scripture or other inspired teachings. Sometimes that's how God talks to me, is I will hear my answer in a scripture written by a prophet. So watch for this answer, listen for it, be open to any answer. This is difficult to do. When I have a specific answer that I want, I keep trying to find that one. And sometimes God is like, but wait, I'm trying to give you a better one. I'm trying to give you something better than you have right now. So just listen and trust. And then have faith to follow along. Sometimes we get answers that we love, and sometimes we get answers that we're like, oh, really? I don't know if I could do that. If you want to go full force on your business, you might get an answer that says, just wait. Be patient. It's not quite time yet. I have gotten this answer so many times, and it can be heartbreaking and disappointing, especially if you have felt called to something, some direction. But I also know that God has my best interest, my children's best interest, my husband's best interest at heart. And so I just trust, even if it seems like the decision is a hard one or one I don't really want. Or conversely, you might not want to start this business or grow your business to the next level. You might just want to embrace whatever family phase you're in and stay put in this life that you have right now. And yet God's answer for you might be to keep going with this business idea. And this can be scary and overwhelming and frustrating. You think, I just want to be a mom. I love my kids. I just want to do mom things. You might wonder why you can't see what God sees for you, why that vision is kind of hidden for you and you're not super excited about this plan. But again, just trust. Trust Him. Know He is bringing you something incredible. When I have been able to sit back and acknowledge that whatever God is telling me, that is the best step for me, I have been able to, number one, enjoy the phase I'm in better, and number two, welcome the next phase when it is time so much more. And I want the same thing for you. Finally, I want to say that for me, building a business has never been separate from my emotional and spiritual growth. That might sound kind of silly, like how do you grow spiritually while building a business? It happens. Anytime I ask God for help with my business, I learn and grow in ways that I never have before. It feels to me like a path that He has created for me, and He has things to teach me along this path. And so every time I'm able to step into it, especially a scary part, especially a hard part, then it has become a prominent vehicle in my life for more growth. That is something I keep trying to tell other women of faith, because so many of us look at a business like something kind of cold and unfeeling, like this entity that's going to make us selfish or greedy or just chasing after the bottom line. And while that's possible, I don't think that's the case for most faithful women. Most of us make our business kind of part of our passion and part of our life's mission. And we lean into what God is calling us to do, even if that means to pause for a minute, and we try to discover what it is He wants for us to learn in this moment in time. So what if you looked at your business not necessarily as a means to make money and to build something that you don't quite understand yet, but as a means to grow and learn and draw closer to God. Would that change your mind about how to step into this phase of life? When I struggle with my business or my clients do, there are two things I like to remind myself and them to get me back to basics. The first one is, don't forget the people who are waiting for you. If you are a coach or a content creator who helps other people, there are people out there in pain waiting for you to help them. And number two, don't forget what God has in store for you. It could be something so phenomenal and so mind-blowingly amazing that one day you'll just stand back in awe of what He has guided you to build. We don't want to give that up just because we're a little bit afraid of what we don't know. So regardless of what you guys decide, if this is the right season to start or grow your business, or if it's not quite yet, I hope this episode was helpful, because whatever God has in store for your life, it's going to be incredible. And I'm excited to see what you do with it. Thanks for listening, my friends, and we'll talk next week.